Good morning, everyone, and welcome to CBT 2020's Virtual Career Development Discussion. I am your host, Kristin Bragg, Class of 93 and a SUMA Advisory Council member. I am a Senior Vice President of Strategic Planning for Warner Media Ad Sales, and I serve as a mentor for the Warner Media Women's Business Resource Group and for the National Association for Multi-Ethnicity in Communications. The program today will begin with a brief overview by our keynote speaker, after which we will break out into 4 small discussion groups. The small groups will last about 45 minutes, and each will have a different focus. The topics of the small groups will be impact of COVID-19 in the workplace, interviewing virtually, career services for alumni, and transferable skills. When you registered for this program, you should have also had the opportunity to sign up for a breakout group. If you did not, please message us in the chat with your preference, and we will get you into your preferred group. Our keynote speaker for this morning's program is my Warner Media colleague, Ramon Escobar. Ramon is VP Talent Recruitment and Development for CNN Worldwide. He is responsible for the recruitment of all on and off-air talent for CNN US, CNN International, CNN en Español, and HLN. He also served as the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion for CNN Worldwide from January 2017 to June 2019. He came to CNN after several years at Telemundo as EVP of Network News, overseeing the entire news division. Previously, Ramon was VP of MSNBC in charge of all live news programming. He was VP and News Director of NBC station in Miami, WTVJ, and got his start in television as a producer at Univision's owned and operated station in New York, WXTV. Ramon earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Missouri School of Journalism and is a graduate of the Institute of Political Journalism at Georgetown University. He is also a professor of journalism at Florida International University in Miami. Let's give a warm welcome to Ramon Escobar.
Thank you so much, Kristin. It's so strange to be doing this. I know it's still hard to get used to after doing this since March, right? But we're all trying. So thank you all for being here in this virtual coming back together. I have to share with you that Syracuse is truly one of my favorite places. And I don't say that a lot for a lot of other schools. I've hired a lot of people from Syracuse, and they are absolutely some of our finest reporters, anchors, and leaders in our company. So I can't get enough actually of Syracuse folks. And so I really, really love being part of this program. I also have a special place in my heart for this program because it reminds me of how I grew up and the opportunities that were given to me by those who went before me. You know, if it wasn't for programs like the ones that you were part of, you know, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go to school. You know, I needed the scholarships and the helps from this type of organization to be able to make it through school, because my parents, you know, came to this country with not much. So anyway, so thank you for having me. I'm coming to you from Connecticut, from Western Connecticut. You can see the woods behind me. This is my sister's home. And so she's kindly allowed me to come to you from our backyard here. So I'm happy to, if anybody sees anything behind me like a bear or a deer, let me know, please, because I am not used to that. That is not my habitat. You know, I'm openly gay, so when people say bears are behind you, it means something else, and I don't think it's what's going to be happening behind me. So please let me know if you see anything crazy. So I want to take today, in the next few minutes that we have together, so I want to talk about today a few things. I want to give you some, I guess, some tools, if you will, some things that I've learned along the way through either lessons or mistakes I've made, things that I've learned, things that work for me, as we navigate what is clearly a world of landmines, even more so in 2020. So I want to do that today. Secondly, I want you to think about one person, and that one person is you. I'm not here to give you a blueprint for how you can change your company. I'm here to talk about you and the personal responsibility that you want to take in your life and in your career. That's all that you can control right now is yourself, right? I can't show you how to control everyone else, but I can give you some thoughts about what you can do. And that really is what today's conversation is about. And I think the third thing as we get into this is, I can't stress enough the decision that you have to make about whether you're a leader or not. Now, I'm going to assume that if you're listening to me, either as a student or an alum of Syracuse, that you have chosen to be a leader. That's my hope. And I think by the end of this, I want to make the case that you need to make that choice. But leadership is a choice. And I need all of you to be leaders if we're going to make some progress that I think all of us want to make. But I want to give you that pitch, and I hope you have the confidence and take that on if you haven't already. All right, so I think about 2020, and really I think, when I think about 2020, I think kind of this sums it up, right? I mean, really, if you could sum it up in one little emoji of technology in 2020, it would be that little crappy emoji, right? It's been, let's say, I'm sorry to use this term, but it's been a shitty year, and it's not over yet. So let's accept that, right? It's impacted all of us everywhere around the world, no matter our age, our socioeconomic status. Obviously, some have been hit harder than others. I love when people say, oh, we're all in this together, or we're all in the same, we're all in the same boat. I go, no, we're not. We're in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. Some people are in big boats, some people are on rafts, but it's been that kind of year. This is kind of what I think about every morning. We seem to have some really crazy choices, and all of them seem to be pretty bad. Sometimes it feels like we're getting punched in the face, right? And it's like, wait a minute, and we get punched again. It's just the year that won't go away. And, it's not just the obvious pandemic, but we all have been around and seen this reckoning. For many of you here, this is not new. This is not something like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. It's not a surprise. This didn't sneak up on many of us. But for some people, it's now real, and the reckoning is real. And like I said, for many of us, we've known this a long time. But there is no doubt others who are waking up to what many of us have known for a long time. And I want to make the case to you today that that's a good thing and presents an opportunity. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides that I put together from different presentations and classes that I've given throughout the last year. But I'm going to try to go through them quickly, but I want to kind of give you some tools and language to use as a leader when you approach the world that we're living in today. And one of the things that I think so many people underestimate when they live in a diverse world that we live in, and where a diverse world is increasingly important in terms of being successful as a business, being successful as an organization, being successful as a university, is I want to give you the language that you can use to make your case and to lead. And I think one of the things that most people underestimate is the power of culture. Culture, this is a famous saying that no one seems to be able to attribute to the right person. We still don't know who actually said it, but culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? There's some belief that it was Peter Drucker during a Ford Motor Company, but most people think it's the author's unknown. But the point here is that there's nothing truer than the fact that culture dominates. People always ask me, what's culture, Ramon? Can you describe culture? Can you give me the definition? And I actually can, a definition that I find useful. Culture is what happens when people aren't looking. Culture is what happens when people aren't looking. So imagine you in your class or in your office, or, well, I know that's hard to imagine because these days many of us aren't there. But remember those days when we used to go to a meeting or used to go to a get together, and everyone would be in the meeting and everyone would be talking about stuff, The meeting would start, and then you talk about stuff, but you're not talking about the stuff that's really on people's mind. And then the meeting's over, and then you go outside. And in the hallway, people are talking about the stuff that's really bothering them. That is culture. Now, that's not a good culture, because you should be having that conversation in the meeting, but no one wants to do it, or there's fear or all types of things. But that's culture. Culture is the things that happen when people aren't looking. So what happens every day, right? That's the culture. And the reason I talk about this is because most organizations, institutions, or places where you work, the success is directly correlated to what kind of culture you create. And once again, I'm talking about you. I can't speak for all the places that you work, and I'm not here to try to tell you, you got to do all these, you got to go tell all these people to change. What can you do to create a culture of candor? So it's important to understand, when I talk to people about how to navigate this world, I always say, try to envision what you would like to see happen, how you'd like to see this thing turn out. And it's really about how our intentions and our willingness to both give and receive feedback, right? Because some of you on here aren't leaders or aren't leading people, meaning that you're not managing people. You're leaders, but you're not managing people. So it's also about how you receive feedback. So what are our intentions or our willingness to give or receive feedback? It can backfire, right? If we don't offer an environment or an intent where we want to be truly heard or truly listen. How do you create cultures? How do you create an environment, whether it's in a meeting or an office or the way you interact with somebody? So one of the first things I want to say to you is, how do you create a culture of candor? You need to answer that question for yourself. You have to take responsibility. It's not about, well, my boss didn't do this or my teacher didn't do that. It's, what are you doing to create the culture? Even if the other person isn't. There's the shocker, right? The other person may not be creating a culture of candor. And then you're going to say, well, I'm not going to either. That's not leadership, right? Let's keep going. So what drives culture? Well, in a word, leaders. And that's why this question of you deciding whether or not you're going to be a leader is so important. I'm not trying to be facetious. I learned a long time ago that how much leadership is a choice. And the reason it's a choice is because it's unfair, right? You've heard that saying, leaders meet you people meet you halfway. No, they don't. I don't know a lot of people who meet me halfway. I know people who don't meet me any part of the way. I have to go get them, right? I think of my mom waking us up in the morning, or my sister waking up, my niece this morning. Was she meeting her halfway? No, my sister had to go in there and get her out of bed, right? Sometimes that's what it takes, metaphorically. And that's why leadership is a choice. So ask yourself, do you choose to be it or not? You can't go halfway in this. How do I describe leadership? And I want to give you these because I've really embraced these 4 E's for a long time. I had the pleasure of working with someone many, many years ago who was a pretty good leader, not on diversity, actually, to be frank, but he was a pretty good leader in other ways. But his name was Jack Welch. He was the chairman of General Electric when they owned NBC. And he used these 4 E's, which I thought were pretty interesting. And I've learned them and I've applied them ever since. And what are the 4 E's of leadership? And I like the E's because they're easy to remember. My last name's Escobar. The first E is energy. When you come into whatever you're doing, great leaders that I've observed always have really boundless energy in terms of the way they engage. They're happy to be here. They want to be here. They look after themselves in terms of making sure they have the energy it needs to take the jobs that we all do. I'm in the news business. You need a tremendous amount of energy to be in the news business. But most of you do the types of jobs where you need a lot of energy, and 2020 has proven we need a crap load of energy. The second E is edge. What is edge? Edge is basically meaning you have the confidence to do the right thing. And sometimes doing the right thing is not the popular choice. It's not the choice that if you were to take a poll, everyone would want to do. But as we know, those aren't always the right choices. This is the tough choice that we need to make, and being able to do it. Sometimes doing that, which is unpopular or people don't want to hear, but it's the right thing. Having the ability to do that is critical as a leader. The next one is execute. this is pretty basic. I know leaders who have some of these other things, but then they don't get the job done. Whatever the metrics are of what you do, right? If you're a salesperson, are you selling? If you're a news person, are you getting some great stories or breaking stories? If you're an engineer, how was that bridge built? Whatever it is that measures your success. If you're a student, one of the biggest measures of success are the grades you get. Point is, are you executing? Because there's no point in doing all the other stuff and then you're not getting the job done. The fourth E is the one that's I want to talk about that screws everybody up, and that's energize. This is the one that if you have these three, you can still not have the fourth one and you'll be a massive failure. What do we mean by energize? And this is important as you navigate this world, because this is a very pessimistic world we're living in right now. Energize is that ability to literally lift other people up. I talk about my niece in her bed this morning. My sister sometimes literally goes in there and lifts her up. It's not pleasant. She yanks her out of bed, but it's energizing others. Metaphorically, it's about how you inspire and pick people up. And I had a leader who once said, and I thought this was really interesting, leaders put smiles on the faces of their employees. Obviously not all the time, but that's a real goal. And I thought, wow, that seems, at an early age, I thought, man, I didn't expect that. That seems really kind of, unexpected, but it's true. Energizing. That's why leadership's a choice, because a lot of people, the people who fail on this say, it's not my job to motivate others. It's not my job. They should come motivated, right? You can take that approach, but leaders don't do that. Leaders know that constantly they're thinking about how to lift people up, because that drives culture. Why? Because it's all about people, and you drive culture. You have to choose to do this. And guess what? The reason so many people don't is because it's hard. And it means you got to take on extra responsibility. And it means that you got to do things. And I keep thinking about my mother, who constantly tells me that when you choose this route, it is the high road. And the high road is lonely. Sometimes there's no traffic on the high road because not enough people choose it. The low road is a traffic jam, okay? Think of Michelle Obama saying, we go high, they go low, right? Leaders go high, and it's hard, but it's incredibly rewarding. And it's one of the ways I would submit to you how you're going to navigate these complicated times. So why is culture so important? Because literally every moment in life is driven by culture. When we hire people, right, we express our culture. When we develop people, we discuss culture. When we decide how to give them feedback or promote them. Our day-to-day meetings are culture, right? Culture surrounds us. It's like, those Star Wars fans, it's like the Force. It surrounds us, and it can be the positive force, right? It can be the force for good, or it can be, dare I say, the dark side, which we don't want to go there. That leads to crazy stuff. So I want to give you some language. A lot of people, I've done a lot of work in the diversity space. I was head of diversity for CNN for many years. And I'm obsessed with this because I think people need the language. The problem with diversity a lot of times is people don't agree. The first mistake you make is everyone agrees with what diversity is. They don't. Do a random poll and you'll find most people have no agreement on diversity. Some people think it's a really dirty word. Some people think it's political correctness. Some people don't want to have anything to do with it. There are some people who want to ban talking about it, as you may have read. But I want to give you some language to use, okay? Because diversity, inclusion, and engagement are the three most important elements of how you drive a culture to be inclusive. And isn't that what we all need today for success? So diversity is a fact. It is a fact. It is the full range of differences and similarities that make each person individually unique, right? Some are visible, some aren't, right? Some are visible, some aren't, right? Like things like race, sometimes they're visible. Sexual orientation is not visible. Gender, there's so many factors of diversity that are visible or not visible. It's the whole combination of them. Point of view, political persuasion, all that stuff is what makes up diversity, and it's a fact. It exists, okay? But just because you have diversity doesn't mean you have an inclusive culture. It means you have a lot of people who are different, but it doesn't mean smack if you don't have inclusion, which is a behavior. If diversity is a fact, inclusion is a behavior. And what that means is inclusion in the workplace is recognizing, valuing, and leveraging that diversity. That's the most important word, right? Leveraging the diversity, meaning you're actually, because someone is different, you're now using it to make the organization better. You're using it to promote equality. You're using it to deliver results, right? It's the very act of celebrating and utilizing people's differences that benefits the organization. Not just, well, they exist and we'll tolerate the fact that that person's different, but we're not going to use it. Which really begs the question, how authentic are you, so that we know to use it? But we'll get to that in a second. And then the third, and this one really loses people. Why? Because people don't want to be leaders. Because the third is what leaders do. Leadership creates engagement. Why? Engagement's an emotion. If diversity is a fact and inclusion is a behavior, engagement is an emotion. It's the emotional connection that people have with their job or where they go to school that's a driver of discretionary effort. What do I mean by discretionary effort? That's the stuff I decide to do because I want to do it, not because someone told me to do it. So when this really is clicking, leaders are driving engagement. And here's what I would say, an easy way to understand this. An easy way to understand this is think about a dance, right? I'm Latino, I'm Colombian, and I love to dance, okay? We're not gonna get into that right now, but maybe at a later date, you know, there's videos. I love to dance. So diversity is basically being invited to the dance, okay? Inclusion is you're being asked to dance, okay? You're invited to the dance, but but if you're invited to the dance and you just stand there, well, you were at the dance, but you didn't dance. Inclusion means you get asked to dance and you're dancing. What is engagement? Engagement is you are making sure everybody's dancing. You see somebody not dancing, hey, come on, come over here. I want you to dance with somebody, or I'll get you somebody, or dance with me. And does everyone like the music? I'm gonna put some music on. I'm gonna make sure there's different types of music. I want everyone to enjoy themselves. That's what an engaging leader does. So if you're missing these, if you only have one, there's no point in having diversity if you're not going to leverage it. And the way to leverage it is to drive it. And that's what leaders do. And remember what I said, leadership's a choice. All right, we're heading towards the end here. Now, this is a hard graphic, but it's the most important graphic. It's one of the most important graphics of my life because it changed the way I think about inclusion, because it made me realize where I want to be on the inclusion scale. I mean, think about the inclusion scale as a pyramid, and that you're trying to work your way up to the top. Being at the bottom is horrible. Okay, and what do we mean by that? Well, at the bottom is repulsion. And I hope no one on here is repulsed, right, by people, right? But there are people in society that cause repulsion, unfortunately, and it's a horrible thing, right? I think you can think of some groups right now in society that really get treated very poorly, right? And that people have like repulsive thoughts about them. That's not where we want to be, right? In the workplace, these are differences, differences are not acceptable. You don't want these people. Obviously, I don't think anyone here is at that level. Second level of inclusion is called avoidance, right? And that's where you simply avoid people because you're uncomfortable with them. They're going to be there, but you're just going to avoid them. I don't think anyone wants to be there either. But then there's this thing called tolerance. And everyone, I know a lot of people think there's nothing wrong with tolerance. We have a museum of tolerance, right? Isn't tolerance a nice word? As an openly gay man, I hear the word tolerance all the time, right? People tolerate, but no one wants to be, my friend Kristin, who works at CNN with me, I've known her for a while and I consider her a friend. But imagine if I went up to her and said, you know what I love about you, Kristin? You're tolerable. I love tolerating you. That would not be a compliment, right? We tolerate animals and puppies and infants that are screaming. But tolerance is not necessarily an attribute that I think at the end of the day is one that you would say, well, that's really about as far as I'm going to go on inclusion. But I would tell you, most people sit right at tolerance. So then acceptance. Well, people say, what's wrong with acceptance, Ramon? Acceptance is great. Well, acceptance concentrates on people's similarities. And what I learned about this is, while acceptance is interesting and not a bad place to necessarily be, it's not the best place to be because you focus on what makes you similar to people. Where do we want to be? And look, we can't always be there, but we should be efforting to be there. And this is where my eyes opened up many years ago when I studied this. Appreciation, that's where we want to be. That's where you see people's differences as positives. They consider those traits to be valuable. Imagine that. You consider people's differences as positives. That is the inclusion scale where we want to be. Now, I will tell you every day, we tend to fluctuate up and down this scale. But where you're going to be successful as a leader is when you start realizing how people's differences are one of the most powerful things you have. Strength lies in differences, not in similarities. And this is counterintuitive to what we've learned over time. We always, when you hear your daughter or your son is dating someone, oh, they have so much in common. You know, we are trained to think about seeking similarities, right? But yet when we go on vacation, we like to go to exotic places. If we could take that sort of vacation mentality and apply it to everyday life and realize that there's wonderful value in differences and how we leverage it. Think about that. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I want to get to the end here. But here's the point. You need to make the business case every day. It's not just about doing the right thing. It's about understanding that research has consistently shown that diverse teams produce better results, provided they're led, right? That's just the bottom line. So the ability to bring people together from different backgrounds, disciplines, cultures, and leverage that is a must-have. And it's been proven in every area of business, banking, media, law. I mean, you can just go down and see every area. If you have diversity, they are successful in whatever metric they're measured in, whether it's business or sales or ratings or movie ticket sales. This has been proven. This is not rocket science. You don't have to go out and reinvent the wheel. There's so much case study on this that can back you up in any company, in any industry, in this country and around the world. I want you to see this video, and I want you to think about the message that it has. It's only 30 seconds.
Does it make you uncomfortable that I'm black?
Does it make you uncomfortable that I go to the grocery store with a gun?
Does it make you uncomfortable
when I sit next to you on an airplane?
Does it make you uncomfortable that I know you judge me by my accent?
To know that I'm not here to be your flash or fantasy?
That I was 11 years old when I owned my first gun?
Does it make you uncomfortable?
Does it make you uncomfortable
That I'm a Muslim? Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable?
Uncomfortable conversations.
Create change.
And that's what United Shades of America is all about.
That's okay. A promo for a CNN show, but believe it or not, I think it encapsulates what an inclusive culture is, the appreciation of difference and unlocking its massive value. But here's the thing you got to understand. That's not easy. That's going to create discomfort. That's going to create uncomfortable situations. But if we can navigate through with some of the tools I've just given you on creating a culture and leading, the rewards are massive. The rewards are massive, but it requires you taking a risk. So that takes me to the end of this conversation. When I was talking to all the team at Syracuse, there were basically these 4 concepts that I wanted to end with. And that is, these are the things that you're confronting right now. We are living in the time of 2 pandemics. One that is driven by an airborne virus and the other that has been with us for 400 years and that we continue to see every day, that is going to be with us long after the virus is gone. So when you're living in 2 pandemics, I want you to think about this today. It really creates an opportunity. It creates an opportunity because everyone that is part of today's call, I'm pretty darn sure, is built for this. You've been trained for this. You've been living this life and living in this skin and living in this body and brain. You know how to navigate this. You were prepared for this. I think about my childhood. My mother prepared me for this. So think about it as an opportunity to be a leader and to be a bridge during this time. People are going to turn to you. And I really think that's important. I've given a lot of discussions to groups and students and universities. And, you know, the class of 2020 of anything, the class of the university, the class of high school, the class of whatever business you're in, it's going to be one of the greatest classes of all time, because what it had to deal with and what it had to confront, how it had to lead through one of the most transformational times ever lived, is going to make us incredibly valuable to the future to solve problems for people. So if you look at it that way, it's an opportunity. Think about all the opportunities that are out there and how you're built for it. So how do you navigate these waters? Some would say maybe carefully, but my approach is that I think the first moment that you realize this is I hope is helpful. There's a lot of ignorance, okay? That's just a fact. And I tell people all the time, never underestimate how stupid really smart people can be, okay? people who went to great schools or have degrees or multiple degrees or PhDs, never underestimate how stupid they can still be. Some of the stuff that comes out of their mouth, you're like, oh my God, right? And you just want to, and you're like, oh, and that's that moment where take a beat, be patient, understand that there's stupidity all around us, and we were put here to help navigate through that stupidity. That's one of the things we can do. And that's a choice, right? That's a choice my mother taught me and my dad taught me. But how do you do that? Relationships. Form relationships. And don't just form relationships with the people that you like and the people that are like you, okay? We complain about that all the time about other people. I can't sit here and criticize others if I'm not living by the rules that I'm trying to apply to them. How many of you actually develop relationships with people who are nothing like you? Remember I said that similarities lie in differences? So if that's the case, if I was to go to your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed or your whatever your social media feed is that might give me an indication of who you spend time with, is it going to be the same type of people? People who are just like you, came from where you were? How do you mix that up? How do you develop those relationships so that you can navigate these waters that are treacherous and filled with all types of difference? Take your own advice that you're trying to apply to others. And that will help you. Relationships, relationships, relationships. I have relationships with people who I disagree with on a lot of things. But guess what? They come to me before sometimes they do some really stupid stuff or say some stupid stuff. Or when they say something stupid, I can go to them and say, hey, listen, maybe did you think about this? And they don't look at me like I'm suspicious. When you don't have a relationship with someone and you criticize them, the first thing they think about is, who the heck are you to do that? And two, why are you doing that? I'm suspicious of you. My intentions are judged as not being pure because I have no relationship with them. So I would tell you, when you think about navigating these waters and how you approach things, and you know, I'm a big believer in building a bridge, not blowing up a bridge. We're good at blowing up bridges, you know, but we don't seem to be good at building the bridges, right? Because it's a lot harder. It's so much easier to blow up the bridge. So I would urge you to do that. Now, obviously, when it comes to issues of hate and discrimination, I'm not talking about that. I don't want to build a bridge to a Klan member, right? I don't want to build a bridge to someone who's a homophobe. No, that's different. But most of what you will experience in life is filled with people who appear to be well-intentioned, but really are engaged in ignorance or don't know. And I'm telling you, it's harder. I go back to the leadership point. It's harder to do it, but it will pay off in big ways. Third, many of you have been, will be, or are the only one. Okay. I've lived life, as has my sister and brother and everyone in our family. We've lived life being the only one. Okay. It gets tiring. It gets lonely. Absolutely. Take care of yourself. Think about how you enjoy life so that you can deal with that, because being the only one is hard. It gets very lonely, and most companies completely underestimate this. I spend a lot of time telling my company, do not underestimate how hard it is for people to be the only one of something. The only Black person, the only Hispanic person, the only gay person, the only person from Kentucky in a place filled with no one from Kentucky. Whatever that only is, it can be hard. And so first, take care of yourself and really look after yourself so you can navigate that. Because if not, you know, you'll roll up in the corner in a ball, right? So you need to be able to cope with that. And I think that's where resilience comes in. Resilience, some people call it grit. We have to really become resilient, emotionally resilient, so that we can navigate that. Because sometimes when you're the only one, it's hard. Now, I always tell people the best way to not be the only one is to hire somebody else, right? So I hire a lot of people so that I'm not the only one anymore. And if you can get into that position where you can do that and influence that, by all means do it. But really think about resilience. I talk about passion. What is resilience? Resilience is passion plus patience. It's kind of combining the two together. And the last thing I would tell you about being the only one, you got to be optimistic and have hope. You got to. Okay, I was taught to dream, and the business I'm in is a dreamer's business, and I love to dream, and I don't let anybody dash my dreams. But if you start engaging in negativity and pessimism, I'm telling you, man, that is toxic, and it will eat you up. And before you know it, you're the person that you don't want to be, or that you despise in your own company or in your own place. Don't be that person. Don't let that get to you. And the way you do that is build a support group around you. If you don't have people in your company, find them outside your company. You're talking to me. I can be one of those people for you if you approach me. Find allies, okay? If you're Latino or you're gay, a straight white person is not your enemy. Many of them could be your ally. So there's allies out there, mentors and sponsors, right? And build your own kitchen cabinet. I have mine. I pick up the phone when I got a problem. I got a group of people, and they're my turn too, okay? And they care about me, and they're my kitchen cabinet. And then finally, your authentic self. Remember I talked about diversity, that diversity don't mean squat. If you're not leveraging it, if you're not engaging in inclusion, which is the behavior that says, I'm gonna leverage people's differences, well, guess what? If people don't know about your differences, how can they leverage them? So the most important thing you can do is be your authentic self. Be your authentic self. Now, I get it. I don't say bring everything into the workplace, right? There's some stuff you should keep out, okay? But bring more than you usually do. Bring more than maybe you had, right? And that's a choice for you. And I know some of you may think that's a risk, but little by little, I think it drives the culture that you want, right? So being your authentic self is something that I learned from my family. It's the gift that keeps on giving, right? It's the gift you have to give people. And what do I mean by that? Don't be ashamed of where you came from. Don't be ashamed of how you know, if you came from a single parent home, be proud of it. Don't be ashamed that you didn't have anything. We didn't. My parents were poor. And I'm not ashamed of that. That built me to appreciate things in better ways. Never be ashamed, even about the negative stuff, right? I know a woman who I really like, who's a reporter who I've been tracking for a long time, and she's really successful. But, her father was arrested for, a business crime, and she learned a lot about that, and that drove her into journalism. She took a risk in telling me that story, but she's not ashamed of it. It's a lesson in life, and so don't think the tragedies and the traumas that we live through life are moments and opportunities for us to tell a story about our resilience and who we are. And don't be ashamed of it. And don't run away from it. And don't run away from who you are. Who you are is a gift to any environment, newsroom, university, or setting that you're in. So that's my message to you today. I would leave you with this. A CEO who I never thought would say something like this said a few years ago. He said, tolerance is for cowards. Think about that. Tolerance is for cowards. What does that mean? Most people, unfortunately, in any organization or in any setting, they don't want to mix it up. They don't want to make any waves. So it's better to just be tolerant and say nothing, to be silent. And I would tell you that most organizations, this is what happens because people don't choose to be leaders. They don't want to take the risks. It's too hard. But I think the rewards are huge. Tolerance is for cowards. Being tolerant requires nothing from you. To be quiet, to not make waves, to hold tightly to your views and judgments without being challenged. Do not tolerate each other. Work hard, move into uncomfortable territory, and understand each other. And I've always asked groups, who do you think said this? And I get all types of things, right? I get stuff all the way from Ben Franklin to, Harriet Tubman to, who knows? People come up with all types of things, right? This was said by Randall Stevenson, a white guy from the South who happened to be the CEO of AT&T at the time. And he said this in front of a bunch of CEOs about 4 years ago. At the same time, he said Black Lives Matter, and all those CEOs looked at him like he was nuts. And I just thought it was interesting, not only who it came from, but how it was said. And I think that's a really good mantra and something that I hope that you will take and think about. So thank you for listening to me. And I hope that I've given you some tools to think about. I'm available at ramon.escobar@turner.com. Just remind me that you were part of the Syracuse Coming Back Together program. And if you have some thoughts about how you think I might be able to help you through the mistakes and lessons I've learned or the landmines that have blown up on me and how I can help you with that, by all means, happy to do it. So Kristin, thank you. And thank you to Syracuse. And one big plug, I'm really excited about Syracuse because one of my college classmates who I was good friends with, Mark Lodato, is now the dean of the Newhouse School of Journalism. And I knew Mark when he was a little punk. And now, look, he's dean. So anything can happen. Okay. Thank you, Syracuse.
Thank you, Ramon, for your always engaging and thoughtful insights. You gave us a lot to think about, and good for you for getting that CNN promo in there. So now we will separate into groups. You had the opportunity when you registered to select a breakout group. You'll be automatically put in that group when we separate. If you joined the programming today and you do not have a group, we can help you do that. Just message us in the chat. Each discussion will be 45 minutes. And again, the topics are impact of COVID-19 in the workplace with Tara Favors, interviewing virtually with Desiree Sanchez, career services for alumni with Jenna Collins, and transferable skills with Limni Conglin. At the end of the breakouts, we will briefly reconvene.
Personally, I remember I did a lot of traveling for work, and I traveled to a few places before when the word of COVID was just beginning. And my very last trip before the world shut down on us was to Australia. And I was in Australia, and I heard a little bit on the news about the outbreak that was happening in Westchester, but really didn't know anything about it because I was so far away and the news was so limited. And when I came back to work that Monday is when things started to happen, and they shut down the towns in Westchester. And really, as an organization, we started to figure out how we were going to handle this. The news then was sporadic. And so we initially were talking about having people rotate in, come in 1 week or not. I'm sure most of your companies did that if you worked in a corporate setting. So we were going to have red days and blue days. And if you were red, you came in 2 days a week. And if you were blue, you came in a few days a week. And we did that for about a day or talked about it for about a day. And then once we really start to implement it, these headlines started to happen, and we had a virus that was panicking, and especially in New York, where I work, in New Jersey, where I live, the world just changed so radically that we scrapped it all. And within really kind of a day, we went from thinking about alternating days to 100% at work, or 100% from home, I should say. And really, having worked in corporate America, it's a different view, because we also entered into this phase of as the essential worker. And I think we didn't necessarily all know what an essential worker was. I went back to research to find out when the topic, that terminology was first used. I couldn't find it, but really I think the advent of this really created the essential worker. And we recognize that working from home, I remember having conversations at the beginning, was really a privilege, right? Because there are plenty of people who tended to be low income, non-white, who were service workers, who couldn't work from home. And so the concept of what this virus and panic meant to them was very different than what it meant for me, who just came home and sat in this chair and resumed work for the most part as normal. And if you also remember that we had essential workers, from the people who worked in the grocery stores to the people who were doctors, who were lacking PPE. If we remember back to March, we had doctors who were literally in garbage bags. And the headlines were scary. And the ability to work was scary because it was hard to prioritize. So we fast forward 7 months. Where are we today? 42% of the workforce is working from home full time. I know for myself personally, my organization, I'm probably not going to even think about going back to work until June in the office. 33% of us are not working. The figure to the right will highlight where we have where unemployment is rising. Only 26% of America, who are basically our essential workers, the people who don't really have a choice, again, ranging from people who work in grocery stores to doctors, are working on their premises. But that's 26%. That is a fraction. So essentially, the world, if you are working, has become a work from home economy. Almost twice as many people are working from home as they are in an office. And I reflect back to just, again, the impact of COVID on work. The reality is on work, for some people, it's gone away. The graphs that we have to the right highlight unemployment, and the colors, the differentiation of colors are actually by age group. So the dark blue is people who are 16 to 29, so some of our younger graduates, and you see unemployment in hospitality and leisure tremendous. And then the line that is the darker line is people from the light blue line, rather. The dark blue line is 16 to 29. The light blue line is ages 30 to 35, and where we've gotten hit. So you see the light blue line, particularly again for the hospitality business, is hard. And we've and as of June, the Business Cycle Dating Committee has declared that we're in a recession. And so again, when we think about work, we think about just where we are from a broader macroeconomic level. And as we know, recessions can take 6 months to sometimes years to come back from. So we're in a very different instance. So here's where I'd love to engage each of you. So we kind of go back and we think about where we started back in March to where we
today, to really just speak about this important topic and just to give you some good hints and some tools to move forward in the case that you should be interviewing virtually throughout this current pandemic. So just a little bit about me. I've had a really exciting progressive career in human resources for the past 15 years. Currently, I am the Senior Director of Human Resources at Affinity Health Plan. We are a managed care insurance company in New York City. What we do is we offer insurance to the underserved community. So it's a nonprofit organization. We have over 300,000 members. For me, it's great because I get to do what I love, but personally am able to give back to the community, which is very important for me. I currently oversee all recruitment, staffing, onboarding, employee engagement, benefits, here at Affinity. But prior to my being here, I've been here for 7.5 years. My career was solely focused on recruitment and onboarding. So I know pretty much all of the ins and outs when it comes to interviewing and being successful in landing that job. I started my career after Syracuse at MTV Networks in the staffing department, which was a wonderful transition from Syracuse. It was definitely a lot of fun. After that, I moved on to an executive recruitment agency where I had to recruit everything from temporary employers and employees all the way up to executives for the VP level and above. And that brings me where I am today. So in terms of recruitment and onboarding, I hope I'm able to share with you within the next half hour or so my expertise. If you have any questions while we're speaking, just please chat. I have the chat box open, so I will be able to address it live. Or if you're familiar with Zoom, there is the hand raise function on the bottom that you can do as well. So we are paying attention, and we want to make this as engaging as possible, even in this remote capability. So I believe we're going to start putting up the PowerPoints. Okay, so see how important, again, it is to test our technology beforehand. A virtual interview requires tools like camera and microphones. So we want to make sure that the software is there. We want to make sure that we test everything 24 hours in advance, and then again, even 15 to 30 minutes before the interview. We want to make sure that your internet connection is working. If we can go back, I don't know who's driving right now. Yep, that's good right there. Sorry, so we want to make sure that the sounds and video is turned on to make sure that everything, again, is working in time for the conversation. So it's very appropriate for this morning. Secondly, wear your professional attire. Very often people are at home, so they're a little bit more relaxed. But in a virtual interview, you should always dress the same as you would in a face-to-face interview. Doing so not only makes you appear professional and excited about the opportunity, but will also make you feel more prepared and confident. With Zoom, with the internet, people always joke that it only matters what you're wearing, waist up. I will share a very cautionary tale. Recently, I did do an interview with a candidate who was interviewing for a position here at Affinity. And I will tell you, the candidate got up, and unfortunately, there was nothing odd on the bottom. So that was quite interesting. So I always, we laugh about it, but make sure we wear slacks. It may not necessarily have to be the full suit since we are now at home, but just make sure that we're covered in the event of an emergency. Prepare in advance. I'm gonna definitely spend a little bit of time on this one because it's key. It's key in terms of this remote environment and interviewing virtually, but it's also key should the world open up and should we go back to the way it once was. I don't think we'll ever fully be there, but it's important to make sure we know how to prepare. With any interview, you'll always get the best results if you take the time to prepare in advance. And just because you're in front of a computer doesn't mean you should rely rather on the quick ability to look something up, to Google something quickly while you are engaging in this conversation. Make sure you research the company, review the job description, and plan for some of the commonly asked questions. I can't tell you how many times it's happened where at the start of an interview, the person is not even familiar with the job description because they applied to so many jobs and they just can't remember what job it was that they're interviewing for right now. So if you don't take the time to review the job description and the company, it is noticeable, and it's just not the best face to put forward on your first interaction. Next slide. So some common interview questions, whether again, now in our present day or in interviewing face-to-face, one of the first things that most common bombs is to tell me a little bit about yourself. If you do research, you will always see that's always one of the most common questions, and it never fails that it's always one of the first questions that gets bombed during an interview. Tell me a little bit about yourself. We should all be prepared with our own professional elevator pitch, and that's really what it is. So again, if you review that job description, this answer to this question should be relevant to the job description. When an interviewer does ask you, I would say she, is trying to get to know the professional you. So again, if someone were to ask me, tell me a little bit about yourself, I'm not going to answer that question. Hi, I'm Desiree, I'm a mom. I'm definitely a shopaholic. I love TJ Maxx. The security guard knows that I go twice a week on Wednesdays when they stock, and then again on weekends with my daughter. That's not the answer we're looking for. So again, just think about your professional attributes, how they relate to the job description, and really create a 1 to 2 minute professional elevator pitch. We were all just in the main room. Ramon gave an excellent presentation. Imagine meeting him in the elevator and you go up to him and say, you did a great presentation at CBT. Thank you for joining us. And he's like, great, tell me a little bit about yourself. The answer that he's looking for, he just said he likes to hire us. It is not about your personal. It's how can I hire you? That's in essence what he's looking for. That's the question at hand. Describe a work environment in which you are the most productive. Could be a little bit of a tricky question. That question in itself is really asking about teamwork. How do you work with a team? What are the professional attributes that you have that can make sure that the job gets done? So make sure that you think about that and just be prepared for it to be asked in a few various different ways. Next. What was your greatest accomplishment or challenge at your prior employer? So this one is funny, right? A lot of people will typically ask, what are your strengths or what are your weaknesses? This takes a twist on that question. And what they really are looking for, again, is how are you able to take your skills and apply them to the current role that you're applying for? How did your previous employer or your previous employment get you ready for this next step in your career? Next. How would your coworkers describe you? So then again, this is very similar to the strengths and weaknesses. How do you interact with your team? Very often, especially now in this remote environment, this is key because in a company, in a business, unless it's your company and your business, you're not running the show. You need to work with people to get the mission and the job done. So you have to really make sure that you're able to identify 2 to 3 adjectives that are able to persuade the interviewer to make sure that you know what you're applying for, again, you know what the mission of the company is and how you're able to kind of just tie it all together. How do you measure your own performance and success? Everyone should have a story prepared to describe using the STAR method. So for anyone who is not familiar with the STAR method, it simply stands for situation, task, action, and results. This is a question that I always ask because it allows me to gain a sense of the applicant. They are able to, one, hopefully share something that they were able to accomplish. Secondly, able to describe why it was important to them. And third, be able to, tell me what the impact to the business was. So always make sure you have at least one professional story at hand. That way you're able to share with the interviewer. Now, these are some common interview questions that are the norm. If you Google them, this is pretty much what will come up. But things have shifted. Things have shifted since March with this new remote capability, this new remote environment. So if we go on to the next slide, we'll go on to some ways in which these common questions have changed. So again, some of the new questions being asked in this new remote environment. What is your most valuable asset when it comes to remote work? Think about the technology. Think about how to be savvy, knowing your tools that would allow you to communicate with the team, communicate with your leadership, and ensure that you're able to get the job done. Now, Candace did ask a question in terms of, in this remote environment and for remote work, to make eye contact, you look at the camera, at the person, or at the screen. So one key part in terms of being prepared is to make sure that you take a look at your full environment. So before you get on the screen or before you fully engage, you should practice looking at the screen. You should open up the screen to see how your background looks. And I'll go into a little bit more in detail, but to truly have eye contact with the interviewer, you're looking directly at the camera. So it's hard because you're distracted. You want to look at yourself and see how you look. But in doing so, you're really you're not looking someone eye to eye. So I hope that answered your question, Candace. Some of the other remote questions that are being asked: how would you handle lack of face-to-face contact when you are working remote? So again, this is asking about communication. So you have to be prepared to assess how you're able to communicate, not only during the interview, but we want to make sure, we want to project that success, how you're able to communicate with the team. So your written communication, your ability to use different platforms, such as the one being used while you're interviewing, whether it's Zoom, WebEx, Google Meets. There are so many. Blue Jeans is actually another one that's being used. So you want to make sure that you, again, insinuate that you're able to keep on top of the technologies available at the current time. And then how do you handle your calendar and schedule? This is asking really about transparency. So really making sure on, how are you handling your day-to-day work? This is something that, when we're all in the office, we're able to see one another. We're able to see what we're doing. So with this new remote environment, your employer or your prospective employer is really trying to gain an understanding of, how can I keep track of what you're doing? How can I make sure you're doing, what you're supposed to be doing on the clock? You're doing your job versus doing child Zoom school or anything like that. So that's, they're looking for you to be transparent. So these are some of the new questions that have been asked, that have come about. I'm sure in terms of future questions, it will continue to evolve as time goes on. Next screen. So asking questions, it's important because if you do have a virtual interview coming up, it's key to make sure that you do leave a lasting impression. One way to do this is by asking insightful, thought-provoking questions during the video call, because your interviewer cannot read your body language or make small talk with you while you walk around the office. I'm huge on shoes, so typically when I walk around with people in the office building, we always joke, oh, I love your shoes and things of that kind. That's not happening on these Zoom calls. So we have to really try new ways ways on how can I, before I hang up, leave an impression on this candidate to make sure that, or on this employer to make sure that she's going to remember me. You know, what can I ask? So some questions, again, that you can ask, and this, you know, at least for these top two, is not necessarily limited or restricted to this time of COVID where we are all working from home, but it's truly, how would you describe the company's culture? That's thought-provoking. That's, you know, making it seem I want in, but how do I fit in? What kinds of opportunities does the company offer when it comes to career growth and mentorship programs? It shows I want in and I want to stay here. Retention is key. You know, right now with the millennial generation, people leave in and out of companies. So when an applicant does ask about opportunities for growth, it shows that they want to come in and they want to stick around for a little while. So that's always something that stays top of minds. And then something that's relevant to today. Are there special protocols the company has put in place as a result of COVID for onboarding and new hires? You want to make sure that you are relevant to the times. If there's something that was discussed during the interview, you want to maybe take notes and, you know, jot back and ask that question. The last thing you want to do, especially in this remote environment, when you have the opportunity at the end to ask any questions, is to say, no, I'm good. Always make sure you have at least one question on hand. Before I go to the next screen, I do want to address Anthony made a comment to everyone. I've never been asked about my calendar and schedule. It reads to me as micromanaging. I hear you. But again, we have to remember that times have changed. So typically when we're all in the office, there's a lot of everyone getting up, everyone going to, you know, to the water cooler. But you can at least as a manager or leader know and see in real time what the team is doing. You know, are we working on a presentation? Are you good on the next deadline? Whereas when now with everyone in this remote environment, if I can know if I'm sending an IM to someone on my team and they're not responding right away, I could see, okay, she's on a call, she's in a meeting. Whereas typically I'd just be able to look out of my office and see if, you know, someone on the team is sitting there or not. So I hear you on the micromanaging, but just know it's a different way, it's a different tool to be able to really see, in essence, a way where people are working. Or does someone go to a restroom break? Is someone, you know, having lunch? We no longer have the ability to just look over our shoulder and see one another. So it's a way to make sure that we are still doing at task. Next screen. So important tips. I've just been forewarned we are at closing, so I want to hit this quickly. Limit distractions. Again, the best place to interview in your home is a quiet location. It's tough right now because a lot of us are wearing multiple hats. So make sure that when you are set up for the virtual interview, make sure that you set up a time where the house will be quiet. You're able to set up a time where there won't be other people in the house. If you have children, maybe around nap time or at a time where they're doing their own thing in terms of school, that way you're able to fully commit to the interview. Use professional body language at this time. It's a little bit more limited because it's virtual. I always say to keep your hands flat, to limit bouncing your leg because you're literally bouncing on screen. So really just try to stay calm, neutral, make sure that you're able to, again, see yourself before the interview starts. That way you're able to fully see what the interviewer is going to see. Build a rapport and be authentic, be yourself. Be genuine, be kind. We're all going through it together. Like Ramon said earlier, we may all be going through it, but the storm is different, right? We're not all necessarily in the same boat. So just make sure that we truly remain true to ourselves. And
thank you to our facilitators and to those who participated in the breakout sessions. And a special thank you again to our keynote, Ramon Escobar. We hope that you all found this morning's program to be beneficial and enjoyable. Please join us at 10:45 for Let's Talk Politics. And please include SU's multicultural advancement initiatives in your giving plans. The link is in the chat. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of the day.
I sure hope you enjoyed that career session. Lots of good information was shared, and we thank our alumni in the breakout rooms for guiding us through those conversations. Now we have an update from Rachel called What We've Accomplished Together.